Our next talk is by Curt Stripling. He's with Texas A&M Forest Service. The talk is entitled Integrating Geospatial Applications for Fire Protection, Planning, and Operations. And I know I've been at a lot of these conferences, and Texas Forest Service is always there and in force. As a matter of fact, the Esri Forestry GIS conference last week, their director was there talking about some of their solutions. Curt is currently the GIS coordinator for Texas A&M Forest Service Forest Resources Protection Division. He serves as a project manager of the Texas Wildfire Risk Assessment Portal, otherwise known as TexRAP, and the Southern Group of State Foresters Southern Wildfire Risk Assessment Portal, known as SouthRAP. He has spent the last 10 years working to improve wildfire risk assessment data, models, and technology transfer across the South. His most recent project, TexRAP, is a new tool that is helping to arm Texans with the information they need to mitigate wildfire risk. Curt?
Thanks, Mark. Well, good morning, everyone. I don't know how a forester from Texas actually slipped over here to Florida, but I sure appreciate the invite and enjoy meeting everyone and enjoy the presentations we've seen over the last day and a half. Really good stuff. So as my title indicates here, I'm going to talk a little bit about integrating geospatial web applications. Really the emphasis is on web. We spent the last 10 years working on risk assessments, really 5 years working on a risk assessment in Texas. And it has a lot of GIS modeling, a lot of science behind that, but I'm not here to talk about that today. I'm just really here to talk about how we've taken that information and how we're delivering that to the people that we service, which is the citizens of Texas, the counties, and so forth. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started and just give you a little bit of a background. I think the state of Florida was actually, Florida Forest Service was actually the first one to produce a statewide risk assessment in the nation. I think that was done in the late 1990s. And then from that, the Southern Group of State Foresters really liked what Florida did, and we took that project and we expanded that for the other 12 states in the South. And Texas actually managed that project. And we learned a lot of things in that process. We learned that we didn't have very good data to really produce a risk assessment. So we spent the last 5-6 years updating our data, updating the risk assessment methods, and moving forward. But I just thought I would acknowledge, the state of Florida to kind of being the pioneer in that area. And I think since then, we've updated our assessment. The state of Florida, in parallel, has updated their assessment, just released some new results as well. So out of the states in the South, I think Florida and Texas are leading the sector. So what's your impression of Texas? That's kind of a loaded question, right? I don't want my feelings hurt too bad, so I'm not going to open it up for comment. But, most people that I talk to that are not from Texas, they think of Texas as being a bunch of oil tycoons, cowboys, wide open spaces, big cattle ranches, right? So, well, there's a new normal in Texas. Texas is one of the fastest growing states in the nation. I think we have a 12% growth rate since the 2000 census, which is among the highest. And by 2040, we're expected to have 35 million people, which is a 75% increase from the 2000 population. And it's what is happening. A lot of people moving into the urban cities, moving away from the rural areas. We used to be considered a rural state, but I think now it's safe to say that we're pretty much an urban state, as far as percent of population wise. So, with the increase in population, people are trying to find places to live, so they're moving out into the wildland, urban interfaces. So that creates challenges as far as an agency, because we've got to monitor where these people are moving, be able to create awareness and inform them of where their risk is and where they're located. Some other challenges that we're dealing with are land use changes. You think cattle and cotton is king in Texas, but that's not so much the case anymore. There's a transition, more emphasis on wildlife management and big game hunting. So a lot of these big cattle ranches, especially with the droughts, they sold off their cattle herds. They're moving to wildlife management and emphasizing these, game ranches. So with that, you would think, the cattle are out there grazing, reducing the fuel out there. So you remove the cattle, well, guess what happens? You get a fuel increase, right? So this has really impacted, our fire behavior across the state. And then climate change. Wow, I think in 2011, greater than 95% of Texas was actually in the worst category of drought there is on the drought monitor for a good period, part of the year. So all this is combined to create some intense wildfires, especially over the last 5 years. I think in just 2011 alone, or let me just ask, how many people from here in Florida maybe went to Texas to fight fires in 2011? Yeah, a few of you. So I think we had like close to 20,000 people that we ordered through in 2011 to come assist us with our wildfires. But there's 30,000 wildfires across the state of Texas in 2011. About 4,000 of those of TFS or interagency partners, responded to, burned about 4 million acres. So pretty significant wildfires in Texas over the last few years. So these are the problems that we as a state agency are facing. So we really need 21st century solutions, to kind of address these problems. And this is really the focus of the talk. So as you can imagine, one of the main questions we're getting after these significant wildfire seasons is, where's my risk? Is my community at risk? Is my house at risk? And you really consider that, there's 20-something million Texans, 254 counties, 1,800 volunteer fire departments, 1,200 cities. And we're the resident expert in this area. Our agency of about 400 folks, about 10 to 15 of those being mitigation specialists. So it kind of gets overwhelming, the workload. So, as a state agency, we find, this is a freak out moment for us. We're overwhelmed with all this response. And so we had to come up with solutions to really address this. So before I go into the new solutions, I just wanted to tell you the old process. This is probably familiar to some of y'all as well. The old solution was, you would get a request, and you walk down to the end of, come in and so this is a GIS request. You need to go down to the end of the hall, left or on the left, in the back of the room on the corner, and go talk to this guy right here. Because, there's only a few people that really know and understand GIS and able to produce these products, right? So, these guys are really needed, but you don't want to waste your time doing common requests and these type of things. These guys are very valuable, to the organization. So you don't want to water down their time, just answering basic requests. But nobody really likes to go and talk to these guys unless they have to, because they have a vocabulary and just because they know the GIS terminology, they really think they're a rock star, and so they kind of slump like this. But the first picture is you give them a little power, they get the deal, and you're really just kind of looking down at you, right? So nobody really likes to go and talk to this guy too much. That's why he's in the back of the corner. I think in Florida, I actually put them in the basement down there. But no matter how good this guy is, he can't really handle all the requests, right? So I think we launched Texture out about a year ago, April 27th. So it's been out a year. Since that time, there's been 600 requests for reports. So it's kind of considered the old way of doing it. It took 2 months to kind of do a report if you knew what you were doing in the first place without training. So you multiply that out, that's 100 years worth of work. And this last year, so this guy, young as he looked in the last picture, by the time he got through filling all these requests, he's going to be kind of grumpy, pick up a few bad habits along the way, right? So, we went back to the drawing board and we said, well, there's got to be a better way to do this. We can't continue to put the workload on the GIS guys. So we kind of stole an idea from Geico, application design philosophy. Make it so easy a caveman can do it right. Maybe more importantly, make it so easy that a forester or a firefighter can do it right. We actually stand a little taller now. We have better tools, than they did in those days. But, let's face it. Some of us just don't really like technology. We just want to get the end product. We don't care about the GIS process that got us there. We just want the end result, an analytical report, or whatever it is. So, but more importantly, really want to make this where city or county planners can actually do this, and even homeowners, if they wanted to. Our goal is that you really shouldn't have to go to the guy, GIS guru. We really want anybody that wants to access the information for it to be available to them. This is only when we're working together as a community that we're really able to solve these problems. So we want to get everybody informed, and that's kind of our goal with Texture. So we talked a little bit about this, but this is what we deploy. This is our solution. TexasWildfireRisk.com. Because what it is just a website that you go to that's full of web geospatial applications. They're actually there in the middle bar. There's 4 applications, plus we have a mobile viewer. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go and quickly highlight some of these applications. I just want to give you an idea of what's possible to do on the web. This may not apply to your particular area. This is where the technology is going. These are what things are doing. This is way we're empowering our citizens, our local government agencies to be able to deal with wildfire risk. So the first application we're going to take a look at is called the Public Viewer. So we want to develop applications that can be learned in minutes and used in seconds. So we don't have a big lengthy user manual that people need to read and use before they actually use the application. We actually have a quick start guide, so they can watch that right there from the application. Walks through a series of slides. In this case, it's 9 slides that gives you an overview of what the application does. And from that, they can pretty much figure out what to do. And then, everybody's expectations is raising up. You don't want days or even hours. You want things in seconds. So that's kind of what we really focus on these web applications. So in this first example here, I'm going to zoom to an address. It's actually my neighbor, Mr. Dell, Michael Dell. He owns a little small computer company in Austin. You might have heard of it, Dell Computers. So once I type in his address, it zooms you to that location on the map. Use this tool called What's Your Risk, and actually click on the map. It runs a 1/4 mile buffer out from his home, summarizes the risk, and basically on this instance here, since he lives in some mass juniper community, can run ground fires, tells him he's at very high risk, and that he should probably seek help. So now that we scared the crap, created awareness. There's a link at the bottom of the bar there to really guide him. If you're a homeowner, what I need to do to protect my home. If you're a county or city planner, what I need to do to protect my community. It really points you to the resources that are available there. So really just a little educational tool. But the power of Texture App is really in the professional viewer, and we really require a username, login for people to come in and register for the professional viewer, mainly just to keep track of who they are and get in contact with them when we upgrade or make updates or pushes and those type of things. For the public viewer, anyone can access. So let's take a look at what the professional viewer does. It looks similar to the public viewer. It's really Bing-like or Google-like in the way that it operates. The only difference really here in the professional viewer, besides requiring a registration, is that you get more data sets and you get more toolboxes in the toolkit to be able to utilize. So let's look at some of the data that's actually in this. So right here, if you don't know anything about the Texas A&M Forest Service, historically we were only located in East Texas starting out. But starting in the late 1990s and moving forward, we slowly put positions in Central and West Texas. So in there weren't any large fires prior to 1988 for whatever reason. The climate didn't permit, or the grazing just didn't allow very large fires. So starting in 1988, our agency went to the first wildfire outside, basically this area right here, and we responded to about a 300,000 acre fire called the Big Country Fire. So that's the first large fire that our agency really responded to in 1988. But what I wanted to demonstrate here is that, look at this period of time, in 16 years, the first big fire started in 1988, and we used, kind of mapped this from historical Landsat imagery, all these large polygons, and then also use the monitoring and trends and burn severity data set that the federal government is also putting together. But between those two, we put together this comprehensive data set of large wildfires over time. And what I really wanted to show was that first large fire that we went to. That's a 16-year period. Now we're just looking at about a 6-year period. Look at the number of wildfires that kind of fill in the gap there. I'm going to flip back and then flip forward one more time. Just look at the number of large wildfires we had in about a 6-year period. Now I'm going to move forward to what we did in 2011. Look at the gap. Look at the wildfires that we responded to in 2011. So flip back one more time. Flip forward. Quite a few fires that we responded to. So anybody notice the trends that I introduced in the beginning? This is because population growth and more fire starts, land use changes, and then the weather climate changes. Really made our agency pretty busy, especially starting around 2005. So here's some of the, just kind of getting into the science just a little bit. I said I wasn't going to talk about it too much, but here's one data set that we use. It's called the wildfire threat. It's really the probability of an acre burning. So it kind of matches where the fire perimeters lined up earlier, as you can see. So is this where the risk is? Not really. It just tells you that this is the probability of acre burning. So you consider less resources out in central and west Texas, higher rates of spread in the light fuels. That kind of makes sense. Why you have a higher probability of acre burning out there. Almost inversely, this is the fire ignition density grid, number of fires per 1,000 acres per year. This is where the fire starts. So this kind of gives an indication where your fire business is. How many runs you're making when you're called out. So I thought it was pretty interesting just kind of look at that relationship between the two. More fire starts in East Texas, but higher probability of acre burning in Central and West Texas. So these are very valuable data sets, but they're really not the complete picture. They really pertain to the probability of acre burning, which is you've got to know where the fires start, how fast they spread, and how effective are you at suppressing those. But there's other things that we want to look at in our risk assessment that weren't included originally in the original risk assessment. Probability was pretty much it. We'll look at the potential, if a fire starts, how intense is it going to be? And where do these things align with the value? So let's look over here at the Bastrop fire. I don't know if you can actually see on the imagery. This Bastrop complex, y'all probably heard about it. It burned, close to 1,700 homes. Started here and advanced, 12 miles, just in about a 2 to 3 hour period, burning everything in this path. And then not until it got here to this agricultural land, kind of just burned itself out. Otherwise, it'd still probably be running. So this is the most significant wildfire that we had in the state of Texas as far as, the number of homes burned. So let's look what kind of led up to that. So we're looking at the probability map, once again. Wow, the probability of acre burning, compared to the rest of the data is, relatively pretty low. Well, that's because they have a lot of resources. In most weather conditions, they're able to suppress that fire pretty easily. So that wouldn't really indicate that you have a risk, in this area. Just looking at the probability map. When we look at the fire ignition density, there's a lot of fire starts here, but again, we suppress them. But look here, this is what we call a characteristic fire intensity scale. We work with some scientists out of the Missoula Fire Sciences Lab. It's really a characteristic fire intensity scale is equivalent to the Richter scale for earthquakes. It's just an order of magnitude of 10. So class 1, a basic firefighter with basic equipment will suppress the fire. Class 5, don't even try to suppress that fire. Just step back, let it run and burn because you're not going to put a dent in trying to suppress it. So there's actually the Bastrop area has what we call the Lost Pines. It's an area that East Texas pines are separated by several 60, 75 miles. And it's just a little island here, and you're basically looking at that island of pine there in Bastrop. So these pine have the potential to support crown fire. Thus, that's one of the reasons they have a high characteristic fire intensity scale. So this is another data set we got from Homeland Security. It's called Landscan USA. We converted it into a product called Where People Live and converted that into WUI, a WUI data set. So this is really just showing where all the houses are across the state. And the final product that we kind of produced here, we want to know where people live. We want to know the flame lengths around where people live. And so if you have a lot of people live in an area in the high flame lengths, on this scale you get a red color or -9. The scale is -1 to -9 relatively. So you have very few homes in the area, very few low flame lengths, and you get relatively a low score. So what this really tells us, from a state perspective, you can kind of see where those things align and where the Bastrop fire actually ran through. So our mission and our agency is to identify the rest of these areas in the state and try to mitigate those before we have another Bastrop event. So I'm kind of zoomed out to the state scale, looking at this WUI response index. So you have a tank of gas and $100. Where are you going to spend it in the state to do your job to mitigate that type of risk? So this really helps us, prioritization tool. But the main purpose of this project is for the local mitigation planners to create a project area. So they got the tools very simply, digitize a polygon, you can select a predefined city or county on there and create a project area. And once you create a project area, it goes through and clips all that data sets that are in the text route viewer and creates actually a report. It's about a 72-page report right here that summarizes all that information. the report runs in about 10 minutes time, So I don't really encourage the guys to run it within 10 minutes. I really encourage them to start the process on Friday, come back on Monday, download it, print up the report, and then go tell their boss that, I worked over the weekend and the night to put this report together, maybe they can get the promotion that they were looking for. But, it's very fast, and you can really use these. And this is what we're planning on using for our foundation, for our CWPPs, our Community Wildfire Protection Plans. We also have a mobile version. Everybody's got a mobile version of what their web applications are. The only difference here is we're able to see the wildfires in real time that are occurring, kind of a situational awareness viewer, and you can see that in context of the risk levels. Fire Occurrence Explorer, this is really a way everybody complains. We would do fire reporting, we never get our fire reports back, be able to visualize that or see what's happening in the form of analytics or a report. So we developed an application for basically deriving, helping people derive patterns related to cause. So over space and time, you can use the toolbox on the left to go in, define some criteria over space and time, and then it's got all kind of visual graphs that actually help you have a peek at what the data actually looks like. Define your criteria, and then it reveals patterns related to risk. And this example here, we're looking at all our arson fires over about a 5-year period across the state. So it gives you quick tools to be able to access that. Now the community editor. So the community editor is really to do all types of assessments, post-fire assessments, home assessments, community assessments. But it's a tool on the web. You can go in and digitize your polygon, digitize your house location, and enter that information. And we actually standardize this on the NFPA 1144 form, national form. So once you digitize your polygon, you get the pop-up menu of the information that you enter. The problem is it still requires you to go out in the field, collect this information, come back and enter it here in a spatial application. So our plan here, where we're moving next, is actually put this form on a mobile device, something that people can actually use out in the field, collect this information, then all that information will be synced across the state for whoever's collecting that. So you really want to be able to reach these homeowners where they can take their proper mitigation action. This is actually a house here in Bastrop that does the mitigation work. So how do we plan to do that? So I told you we only have 400 people in our agency, but we would like to build local capacity. So we're going to set up training programs across the state to train local fire departments. We're already working with the city of Austin, the city of Dallas, some others. They have trained firefighters on staff. We'll send them to mitigation training. They have time to do the data collection for their communities. So they're going to be out with these mobile devices, collecting this information, receive training from us. Once they collect it, the information is going to automatically sync to a web, to the cloud, and sync to our database here. So any information that's collected around the state can be seen, by our state agencies. So we have a situational awareness of really what's going on across the state at any time. So just to review what I've covered here in TextRoute is, TextRoute is really all about building relationships with the locals. And we do that through several applications to create awareness. But the key is, we want to provide the training and the feedback that goes back to us statewide. And we're doing, next step that we're taking with TextRoute is actually developing an online community wildfire protection plan writer. Takes them through the A to Z, providing a community wildfire protection plan, and then be able to community tracker or mitigation tracker. We can spatially see what's going on across the state. So that's kind of the conceptual slide for TextRoute. What are you doing on time? A few minutes. So that's really what I wanted to show on TextRoute. The good news here for you guys is we're actually releasing a South Route probably this summer sometime. So the rest of the 12 states will have similar capabilities in an application called South Route. We haven't really created a URL for it, but we probably should be doing a big publicity campaign and release, kind of get the word out when that happens. Well, I'm expecting that to be sometime this summer. So we have just a few more minutes. I want to tell you some exciting areas that we're kind of moving into. We just kind of finished this project. We have other ideas moving it into more operational context. So if I have just a few more minutes, I'll just kind of breeze through these. One is the wildfire modeling and impact analysis area. We have a weather event in Texas called the Southern Plains Outbreak. These are the events when all the homes are burned and everything's happened. This is from April 15th, actually. You can see all the fire starts here in Texas that started on that day. So as an agency, what fire do we send resources to first to reduce as much damage as possible? You know, that's a big question our agency has to answer. We only have so many resources, so much time. How are you going to prioritize which fire do you go to? So I know the federal government has, a program called WFDIS, or that does fire modeling and prediction. The problem was in Texas, their system, the fires move so fast and grow so big, it's taking them 5 to 6 hours just to say where it was going to be in a couple hours. Well, the fire had already progressed, past that point by the time we got the results of that. So we're looking in Texas, and we're kind of partnered with a company called Silva out of Spain, and they transfer solutions out of Orlando, actually. And they have a mechanism where they can actually be run in about 2 to 3 minutes over the web. So our idea is for every fire that starts in Texas, now that we have all this fuels information, real-time weather, actually model fire behavior, and get runs like this. So we'll know within our intervals here, because what we're looking at, what the little lines represent there, we can actually summarize the risk in terms of number of houses damaged or dollar value, whatever you want to summarize by hour over that planning horizon. So every fire that starts in Texas, we'll have a visual of what the potential impact is over 1 to 10 hour planning horizon. Help us make better decisions in the state. And then 2, we're looking at putting up a situational awareness viewer for real-time operations. With the batch drop event, people want to know what's happening, what's going on. The EOC, the incident commander, the fire crews, everybody wants to know what's going on. The problem is the information is usually best at the local level, but it takes hours, sometimes even days to kind of get that information fed up to the EOC level. We have a situational awareness across the state. So this is some homeowners, kind of checking out to see if their property is damaged. Well, as I told you before, we brought in 20,000 resources in 2011. Our mechanism for tracking these resources, sticky notes. Kind of broke any system that we had, right? So we had to revert back to the old technology. Sticky notes worked great. And whiteboards. A lot of the information was tracked in whiteboards. So we're kind of looking at a new system called Fire Response, also by Silva and Data Transfer Solutions. The key to this application is all your dispatch centers and all your crews out in the field have a mechanism to enter data and allocate resources so you can track where your incidents are, where your resources are at any given time, because all this information is synced in real time. And this is just another map kind of showing that. And the color bars kind of represent different statuses. Red means that the fire is active. Green means someone's en route to the fire. So you have visual cues of what's actually going on. But the big key here is that not only is this going to be located at the dispatch center, but our fire crews or our EOC or incident commanders are going to have mobile devices. And as soon as they enter information, say they arrive on the scene, they do a quick assessment of the fire, where they'll be able to punch that information into their iPhone device, and that will automatically sync back to the EOC at the time that they do it. Also, sync back to the incident command post, so that everybody has the same common operational picture, to make the best decisions possible. So these are the kind of directions we're going. And once this information is into a common database, we're going to spin off mobile applications or web applications that allow the public to have access, not to all the information, but whatever we deem is appropriate, at that level for the public to use. So that really concludes my presentation. I hope it gave you a good idea of how we're utilizing this technology, where we're going with it, and maybe find it beneficial. So thank you for your time.
I'm just curious if you have a method in place to update those data sets. After those fires burned, then obviously fuel prediction stuff and for some period of time.
Yeah, of course, it all comes down to time and resources. And unfortunately, right now, it's pretty expensive to map. We're making inroads with Landfire. I don't know if anybody knows about that program, but they're doing mapping. Kind of the rotation for these things is kind of like a 3 to 5 year cycle, and for updates of the fuel data and homes and what people do. So it's really used, intended for planning purposes. So you look at a 3 or 5 year planning horizon. We think that rotation is pretty sufficient. And hopefully not much changes. In that 5 years, widespread. But I think if we aim for a 5-year rotation, and like you said, when you actually have a fire, then we'll have to develop processes in place to go and do change the fuel model, based on the intensity or the severity of the fire. Good question.
Yeah, anybody else?
Well, this is very impressive. Thank you for sharing this with us. But my question is regarding the data collection, where you have various agencies, local, partners collecting the data. Isn't that kind of a weak link when you rely on many people and organizations? Give you data that you rely on, is it going to be quality and standards, and are you confident that it's going to work?
I'm pretty confident that it's going to work. Of course, we're going to come up with certified training before we release anyone to collect data. And we can put kind of geofencing on it to kind of where they can only collect data within the area that we tell them they can collect data on. So there's a lot of tools and things that we can kind of enforce, a lot of QA, QC type procedures. Of course, like you said, it's only good as the data that you collect. So, we haven't really thought that process totally through and how we might audit it, or if it's really even necessary to audit it. Because these are really, help the local planners, collect data for their information and utilize that. And from the state perspective, we want to be able to see what's going on and what mitigation risks have been reduced. So, the main purpose for us is not that they exactly got it right necessarily, but they're taking the right steps to reduce their risk. But, yeah, good questions.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.